Adam Peters revealing here at the NFL Scouting Combine part of his draft strategy or his preparation, including the potential of trading back to number 27 overall.
You are Locked On Commanders, your daily podcast on the Washington Commanders. Part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
This is Locked On Commanders, part of the Locked On Podcast Network, the #1 sports podcast network. I'm David Harrison, your guy on the ground, credential member of the media, covering the Washington Commanders for WUSA 9, also writing for Commanders on SI. You 5 days a week, and coming up on today's episode, we're going over more of the comments from General Manager Adam Peters and Head Coach Dan Quinn here at the 2026 NFL Scouting Combine in Indianapolis, Indiana, including Adam Peters potentially being ready to trade number 7 to number 27. All that coming up on today's episode of Locked On Commanders, part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day. And it's a little bit tongue-in-cheek. Don't get too crazy or panicked over that. But Adam Peters did talk about all the possibilities that come with having a top 10 pick in the NFL draft. Of course, this is twice in 3 years as the general manager of the Washington Commanders. He's had a top 10 pick. The first one he inherited, so not his fault or not the fault of anybody under his employ, of course. But, of course, this third one that he's getting is certainly something that he's got to answer, his staff has to answer for, and he's hoping is probably the last time, unless they trade up into the top 10, that they have a top 10 pick. And let's talk about all the options, all the possibilities of players that they can stick and pick at number 7, including a lot of them from Ohio State. We'll talk about that here in just a little bit as well. Talk about trading up potentially, which I think if Adam Peters traded up, and so therefore would, most likely, because most draft picks trading up in the NFL draft require a package of picks back to that other team. I'm not sure everybody would implode, but I think a good amount of people would certainly implode if Adam Peters decided to trade up from number 7, even higher in the first round, but also trading back. And he even said, hypothetically, you have to be prepared for pretty much everything. If the team at number 27 comes through and wants to move up to 7 and delivers the right package, what does that look like? Who is a player that might be available at that point that we might be able to accept a trade of that magnitude? And again, it's a little bit tongue-in-cheek, so don't take it seriously as in, number 27 is in play for Washington Commanders to move back from 7 and move back 20 spots. We're not going to be doing any mock drafts here anytime soon where the Commanders trade back to number 27 or anything like that, but just kind of illustrating the fact that as a general manager, he wants to be able to be ready for just about everything. We've talked about this before, the word optionality for Adam Peters, one of his favorite words. I call it flexibility. You call it whatever you want to. At the end of the day, being able to pivot and react to everything that's happening around you in real time the way that you need to. Did get into a little bit of edge rusher type of conversation with both Adam Peters and Dan Quinn. Adam Peters talking about you'd love to go target a Myles Garrett in the NFL draft, but he said there's only one of those people walking around the planet these days, and obviously he's already playing for an NFL team not available in the 2026 NFL draft at number 7 or at any other spot. But that's kind of the ideal prototype of an edge rusher, right? Long, fast, explosive. Dan Quinn used similar type language, but Adam Peters also dismissed the whole arm length thing. He said that he's seen guys with short arms, he's seen guys with long arms, and at the end of the day, it's how they use those arms. If one guy has longer arms, but they use that arm length appropriately or to his strength, it doesn't really matter that he simply has long arms. So it's not about the measurement itself. Plus, I also pointed out that you have, a scouting combine measure these arms, and the arms are 33 inches today. And then you go to maybe the Senior Bowl before that, and they're 32 inches. And then you go to the Pro Day, and they're 34 inches. And so it kind of just depends on who's measuring and doing all that stuff. So he's more concerned with how they use the length that they have, how they use the size that they have, the leverage that they have, more than he is the actual measurements, which will make those of you who are coveting Reuben Bain Jr. for the Washington Commanders at number 7 very happy to hear that Adam Peters is not going to get too wrapped up over arm length measurements of Reuben Bain Jr. or any other player. Wasn't asked specifically about Reuben Bain Jr., but was just asked specifically about arm length measurements. And we all know, at least at the 2026 NFL Scouting Combine, if you're asking about arm length measurements, you're asking about Reuben Bain Jr. Also brought up in one part of the conversation, kind of the Javon Kinlaw lesson. So he was asked directly about Brandon Aiyuk. We weren't draft related specifically, but an interesting little conversation. And obviously, Adam Peters is a smart general manager. So he said Brandon Aiyuk is currently under contract with another team. We will not discuss a player from another team. But he was asked then as a follow-up, kind of just in general, not specifically to Brandon Aiyuk, but just in general, do players deserve second chances. And Adam Peters said emphatically that he believes that players deserve second chances, especially when it comes to like injuries and things like that. And pointed to Javon Kinlaw, someone who had his own injury history with the San Francisco 49ers, ends up with the New York Jets. Reputation wasn't necessarily the greatest when he left the 49ers himself, but then he comes to Washington, and Adam Peters talked about how he was been a very effective part of the defensive front. And I will remind you that the interior defensive line for the Washington Commanders, while the entirety of the defense certainly not good, the interior part of the defensive line was the better part of the not good unit, right? And in a lot of ways, that's kind of being the biggest loser. So congratulations. But at the end of the day, that's kind of the national view on the Washington Commanders interior defensive line. And I personally don't think Javon Kinlaw was a problem. Was he an all-pro caliber defensive lineman? No, it's hard to be when you're surrounded by everything that's going on with that team. But also talked about his presence in the locker room, which I can also vouch for. Javon Kinlaw, great addition to the team, despite all the reputation, despite all the past stuff, despite everything else going on. So as it pertains to Brandon Aiyuk, potentially, not directly from Adam Peters' mouth, just some food for thought there. And then talked about the Andrew Wiley re-signing. We talked about that a little bit on the last episode too, which is kind of reiterating they're looking for true commanders to come into the organization, competitiveness, versatility, all those types of things. Andrew Wiley kind of embodies all those things. So that's what they're looking for. So if they believe Brandon Aiyuk can bring those things to the table, don't be surprised if they go ahead and make that move. I kind of polled some of the other beat reporters who were here while we were all here collected in Indianapolis, and honestly, it's fairly split between people who, and I'm not going to name them by name. They can put out their opinions, of course, on their, they can speak for themselves. I'm not going to speak for them, but it's kind of split between guys who are reporters who think that Brandon Aiyuk is coming, and then who think that Brandon Aiyuk is not coming. And there's even a couple who, one thinks that Brandon Aiyuk is coming but doesn't want him to, and then there's one who thinks that Brandon Aiyuk isn't coming but wants him to. So definitely a wide range of opinions when it comes to Brandon Aiyuk and potentially becoming a Washington Commander in the future. In our side scrum off the podium, I asked Adam Peters, and honestly, if I share the video, you'll hear it, but it was kind of, it's a hard way to ask a question because I need to ask him in a way, he knows who I'm talking about. He's not dumb, right? He knows I'm asking about Brandon Aiyuk, but I have to ask it in a way that he can actually answer the question. And if I ask it specifically about Brandon, he can no longer answer the question. So in a roundabout way, basically just asking him, if you expect a player to become available, right? Brandon Aiyuk expected to be released by the 49ers at some point. If you expect a player to become available, but you don't know when he's going to become available, does that impact your decision-making? And did say, which I smiled hugely at because it's one of my favorite sayings, you operate based off what you know, not what you hope. You know Brandon Aiyuk is going to become available at some point. You don't know when that's going to happen. So when you enter free agency, if you know that Brandon Aiyuk is under contract, you operate as Brandon Aiyuk is under contract. That should not keep you from going to get maybe a Jalen Naylor, a Rashid Shaheed, or another free agent, Juwan Jennings, if he hits the open market. Any of these receivers hit the open market. So I would not expect, based off of those words, for Adam Peters to sit on his hands waiting for Brandon Aiyuk to come available. Now, at the same time, if he knows, because we may not know this publicly, but if he knows when John Lynch is going to release Brandon Aiyuk, and he knows that when that time comes, he's going to get a deal with Brandon Aiyuk done, that could also play a part in this role. So it's a little bit of an answer, good answer, a little bit of clarification, but also a little bit of a truthfully non-answer all at the same time. Coming up next, we're going to talk more about the collaborative effort going on in Ashburn with new offensive coordinator David Blough and defensive coordinator Daronte Jones. That's next on this episode of Locked On Commanders, part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day. And today's episode of Locked On Commanders is brought to you in part by 5 Hour Energy. Welcome to the 5 Hour Energy Flavor Draft with 18 different flavors to choose from, including new options like Confetti Craze, Fruity Rainbow, or Cotton Candy. There is something for literally everybody. The board is set. The flavors are ready, and I've got my number one pick for the 5 Hour Energy Flavor Draft, berry. If there is anything out there on the market that has a berry flavor, I'm pretty much going to try it. Big, bold berry flavor here in this 5 Hour Energy berry drink. Slightly sweet, very fruity, classic mixed berry flavor, smooth sweetness, a little bit of tartness, and it's familiar. It's an easy to recognize taste profile, clean finish with minimal aftertaste, and it's mostly traditional. It's a go-to flavor, again, in pretty much any lineup. You also have peach mango as a little bit of an underdog flavor out there as well. And 5 Hour Energy has a lot of upcoming flavor innovations planned. So find your new favorite flavor of 5 Hour Energy shots available online at 5hourenergy.com or on Amazon. And we're doing that today thanks in part to our friends over at Home Chef. As the new year gets going, a lot of people are trying to simplify their routines, and dinner is a big part of that. Between busy work days, cold winter nights, and packed schedules, having an easy, reliable dinner plan makes a huge difference, and that is where Home Chef comes in. Home Chef takes the stress out of cooking by delivering fresh, pre-portioned ingredients right to your door with easy-to-follow recipes that actually taste great. They're rated #1 by users of other meal kits for quality, convenience, value, taste, and recipe ease, and it's easy to see why. The meals come ready to fit your schedule, 30-minute recipes, oven-ready trays, or in quick lunches, over 30 weekly options, including family-sized meals and different dietary choices. And the recipes are simple, but they feel elevated, even restaurant quality, with dishes co-created by chefs like Gordon Ramsay. For a limited time, Home Chef is offering our listeners 50% off your first box, free shipping, and free dessert for life. Just go to homechef.com/lockedon. That's homechef.com/lockedon for 50% off your first box, free shipping, and free dessert for life. Must be an active subscriber to receive the free dessert. Today's episode is also brought to you in part by Indeed sponsored jobs. Workplace chaos, deadlines stacking up, inbox overflowing, and the one position you have to fill still sits open. When the pressure is on and you need the right hire, this is a job for sponsored jobs. Indeed sponsored jobs helps you reach the people who actually fit what you're looking for: skills, experience, location. So you're not just hoping the right candidate stumbles across your post. And here's a stat that tells it all. In the minute that I've been talking to you, companies like yours have made 27 hires on Indeed, according to Indeed data worldwide. So if you're hiring, spend less time searching and more time interviewing candidates who check all your boxes with Indeed sponsored jobs. Spend less time searching and more time actually interviewing candidates who check all your boxes. Less stress, less time, more results. When you need the right person to cut through the chaos, this is the job for Indeed sponsored jobs. And listeners of this show will get a $75 sponsored job credit to help get your job the premium status it deserves at Indeed.com/podcast. Just go to Indeed.com/podcast right now and support our show by saying you heard about Indeed on this podcast. Indeed.com/podcast. Terms and conditions apply. Need to hire. This is a job for Indeed sponsored jobs. Preparing for the NFL draft is truly a team effort when it comes to the Washington Commanders, and Adam Peters not only has his front office staff and his scouts and his decision makers all hard at work, but the coaching staff also getting in the mix, just like they have ever since Adam Peters and Dan Quinn arrived to the organization, and specifically to new coordinators Daronte Jones and David Blough. Adam Peters shared that recently both coordinators shared their vision for what they want their offense and their defense to look like. Dan Quinn kind of added to that a little bit, saying it's really interesting because they're getting into the nuts and bolts of, it's not just enough to say that this formation or this play or this check is called this. It's getting into the why. Why is this check that? Why is this play called this? What are we looking for here? What are we trying to do here? And it's been a really fun part of the process for him with two new coordinators who have run their own offense, run their own defense, yet kind of getting into the grassroots of building this thing up from the floor up. And while they're doing that, they're presenting to Adam Peters and presenting to the scouting staff what it is they're looking for. This is the type of receiver I need to accomplish this. This is the type of tight end. This is the type of offensive lineman. Whatever it is, the two new coordinators are being on a major role in making sure that these scouts and the decision maker, Adam Peters, know what it is they're looking for when they come to draft weekend, right? And we saw videos previously with Cliff Kingsbury specifically where Adam Peters has the coordinators in the room and says, hey, look, we're thinking about taking this guy. Is this a guy that fits what you're trying to do here? And those coordinators are obviously going to have a say in doing so. Can't give too much information on our David Blough system. It's a little bit difficult for a head coach or a GM to be vague, but also tell us something about what to expect from that scheme. But from the Daronte Jones conversation, both Adam Peters and Dan Quinn did mention the multiple front type of defense. And again, we go back to Daronte Jones' history with the Minnesota Vikings and talking about him with this uber aggressive, quote unquote, Brian Flores defense that really isn't one singular defense. 1 year they use a 5-man front more than anything. 1 year they use a 3-man front. The next year they use a lot of 4-man fronts. 1 year they use a lot of zone with a lot of blitzes behind it or in front of it, things like that. So even the quote unquote Brian Flores defense hasn't been the same thing every single year. So don't expect the Daronte Jones defense to fit in just kind of one singular shell. And even if what we see early on in the spring, it could look different in the summer, could look different in training camp. It's going to be a kind of a continuous living, breathing type of deal based on the personnel that they have is what we're getting. And of course, as they continue to prep for draft weekend and prep their player evaluations and scouting reports and all that stuff, a lot of talk about Ohio State Buckeyes. And a little bit of a laugh kind of went up in the group when this question was asked, because John Keim, ESPN's beat reporter that covers the Commanders, asked the question. And if you don't know, John Keim, a graduate of Ohio State University. So for John Keim to ask an Ohio State question, everybody's going to poke fun at John Keim. But of course, it's a very valid question, right? Is having this many top shelf prospects from one school beneficial? And what Adam Peters kind of pointed to is, you can turn on one game and you can watch multiple high-level prospects from that one game. So in that case, it makes it more efficient and allows you to see more impressive type of plays and performance and traits in a single trip. Talked about Matt Patricia, the Ohio State Buckeyes defensive coordinator, credited Coach Patricia, said that he's a very solid coach, has a very good reputation. So they know that those players are coming, especially the defensive players, are coming from a well-coached unit, things like that. And so it does actually help a little bit. But of course, there's also the question of, when you have this many NFL prospects on one college football roster, how good is the individual? I think Mac Jones went through something like this. Like, you got a Heisman Trophy caliber wide receiver. How much credit do you really give to the quarterback? So I think there could be a little bit of conversation there as well. And then finally, we'll wrap this up here in Indianapolis. Dan Quinn talked about his the most important part for him in that scouting combine, the interview portion. Obviously, the medicals are incredibly important, but talk about the interview portion. And, wants to hear a player kind of make a claim, like state a claim to something and put your name on something, and then go find out if that's true or if it's not true. And then also emphasize to everybody that he and his team, his staff, the scouts on the Washington Commanders staff, they're looking for Commanders. They're not looking for the rest of the NFL. They're looking for Commanders, so they're keep that Commanders lens on everything else. So what everybody else says about every other player and how great they're going to be in the league, just because they might be great in the league to me on Locked On Commanders, or that guy over there on that side or that guy over there on that site, doesn't necessarily mean that the Washington Commanders staff is going to think they're a great commander. And just because somebody else thinks that they're not going to be a great NFL player doesn't mean that the Commanders aren't going to think they're going to be a great commander. So just more grain of salt as we go through this process. It's going to do it for today's episode. It's going to do it for us here in Indianapolis. It doesn't mean we're done talking about what's going on in Indianapolis. I'm going to pack up now and head back home to Virginia. So we will be back on Locked On Commanders to wrap up the week with a couple more days full of programming for you. So make sure you are subscribed, followed along with Locked On Commanders so you get all the latest episodes. And if you never miss the Everydayer Club, literally built for you, lockedoncommanders.supercast.com to check out that Everydayer Club today. For your next listen, check out the Locked On NFL podcast twice per day, once in the morning, once in the afternoon on YouTube or wherever you're listening to today's show. And to the Everydayers, I see you. I appreciate you every single day. I thank you again for coming through yet again today. And to everybody out there, until next time, please be safe, be kind. We'll talk again real soon right here on Locked On Commanders, part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.